Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us on part 2 of debunking, talking about these myths around sexual addiction. And again, as always, Luke, welcome back. Thanks for joining us for part 2. We're going to dive right in here. So, we spent a lot of time, and I really do love the first episode and how much time we spent around debunking myths around sexuality and talking about owning your own sexuality. We're going to talk today about the next myth. And this one, before we hit record, I was like, oh, I really like this one. This is a hot topic. I hear this a lot. So the myth is I can control my addiction without professional help.
Or I can control the acting out behaviors, or we can recover from infidelity.
On and on.
All three of those.
I can get all of the truth without a full disclosure, which, by the way, I think we plugged this a couple episodes ago, Alana, but with Luke here, the three of us are going to be diving in deep to
Deep diving.
disclosures.
Mhm.
Uh, I think you and I both thought we had done this a while ago.
I could have swore we did, but the amount of episodes we're going to break this into to give a really clear idea of what you can expect.
Yeah. I think the one episode that we did talk about disclosures, it was before the three of us had done the certification training. So I think this is so timely. It's overdue. We've done multiple since, and I think really fine tuned the skill that Choose has in doing these in a very healing and professional way. So I'm really looking forward to this multiple episodes and series really that the three of us are going to do around disclosure. So be waiting for that. But again, this we hear a lot like we can do it without it. I can control my acting out behaviors. I can control the addiction without professional help. So Luke, debunk the hell out of this one.
It's one of the 4 faulty core beliefs of an addict that Patrick Carn talks about, which is, "I'm the only person that can meet my needs." So, there is that belief system in play that is, "I gotta figure this out on my own. I can't rely on other people." And that stems from a place of not being able to count on other people. So, if you have an attachment style, like an avoidant attachment style, it's because I did have to do things on my own when I was in my family of origin. I couldn't rely on other people. So, it does come from a place of experience. It's not
Mm,
like this is just invented out of nothing, out of thin air. But if the myth is I can control my addiction without professional help, it's because I've had to do everything else on my own. So, this is one of them. And you tie the shame into that. You tie in the people won't love me if they see me, if they truly know what I'm up to. You tie those 2 pieces together, it makes sense why that's the subject right now. And the only thing you can do to really push it out is to have 1,000 experiences of not doing it on your own and seeing what the outcome looks like.
which is going to be a lot more destruction, I think, individually and relationally, the longer one tries to do this without professional help.
When you think about the first stage of change, it's the countless or counted attempts to do it in a way where I can control the outcome. And that's the first stage. And then there is that place of, I can't do this on my own. It's not possible. And that might be held on to for a moment and it might be held on to longer. And a 12-step process, whatever it is, I'm going to turn my will over to somebody else.
And I'll just throw in here recovery capital. This concept comes from AA, but the more recovery capital, the more things we have in our tool belt, the more support people we have around us, the more likely we are to recover. They did research on this. And so having a coach is good. Having a coach and a therapist is good. Having a coach, a therapist, and a sponsor is good. Having a coach, a therapist, a sponsor, a group is even better. Having a coach, a sponsor, a therapist, a group, friends who get it, having other people who have worked the journey, listening to podcasts, the more things you add to your recovery belt, the more likely it is that you're going to recover. And I don't want to use the word quicker, but the more easily you'll be moving forward with progress. It is so easy to see somebody who is really motivated for change and somebody who is not.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, let me rephrase that. As a professional, it is really easy to see somebody who is really motivated for change and who is not. As a spouse, that was incredibly difficult to see. But as a professional, they come in and somebody who is really motivated for change has this energy of like, okay, what else? And then go do it. And there's action. And okay, what else? Who else? What can I add? And so when someone is doing it completely on their own, there are so many pieces and elements that are missed. And there's so much we can't see on our own. Therapists
Right.
need therapists. We all need therapists or
Oh,
people
yeah.
outside of us who can help hold up that mirror.
100%. We have to do that. I tell my clients all the time, we can't see into our own brains. We're limited in so many ways. And so to have someone to, like you said, Alana, mirror that good, safe people, it's really empowering. I think that's why I just know that when the three of us get together, especially in person, it's like my favorite, most favorite treasured times because I feel like that's what we do for each other. And it's so real and it's so authentic and it's so vulnerable and beautiful and empowering. And it's like no other friendship that I've ever experienced. And that's what I want everyone to be able to have when you're going through these really difficult times. It is empowering. It lifts the shame that you were talking about, Luke. The more you keep this in secret and not share, it does breed shame. So yeah, more tools in your tool belt, the better. And then let's just specify too, y'all, not every professional is created equal either. So please also be mindful. I know the more that I've had the training through APSATs and other betrayal trauma sensitive trainings, that is drastically different. And I know all three of us have experienced this where we have clients that have seen other professionals that aren't educated and trained in this can do more damage than good and more harm than help. So that's something I thought I'd throw in there too when we talk about professional help. It's not just any old professional help. And Luke, maybe you can talk about this because I would imagine you've had men show up who have maybe sought out help and have had more damage. And that's probably where some of this I'm going to do it on my own might come from too.
Yeah, and one thing I was gonna mention, thanks for that, Amy, is I wanna give a little bit of the why on the professional help because a lot of men like me are like, "Do I have to pay that kind of money and spend that kind of time? Is there a shortcut? Is there a quicker way?" And I wanna describe why it needs to be professional help or at least attempt to, is why professional help? It's because that person that's sitting across from you is really important that they show up in a way for you to be able to explore your experience and create a place of safety that you're not going to get in other places of your life. So if they try to fix things that shouldn't be fixed or try to lead you in directions that you're not ready to go or put things on you that you're not ready to hear, that can be very destructive because what we're looking for in this part of the journey is for you to become more aware of how you feel about yourself and what you're experiencing. So that takes a lot of exploration and that takes a very skilled professional to create that kind of environment for you to feel safe in such what your body's going to feel like is a really unsafe place. Alana, we've talked a lot about that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. In the book Dopamine Nation, she talks about this important balance of professionals to be able to hold that safety and the validation and balance it also with accountability and support and tools and resources. And so there is this fine balance, especially working with addiction or infidelity, that there is this fine balance of creating that safe place for their client and being able to hold them accountable. I think of so many betrayed partners who are like, please hold my spouse accountable. But they also sometimes want the therapist or coach to be like beating their spouse on the head with accountability. And you can't do that. That's not how the brain feel safe enough to have real lasting change.
Mhm, mhm.
But there really is this fine balance, and it takes a trained professional to know how to do that.
Yeah. And often what happens too is you have a therapist or a coach with a client, and what happens often with the client is an exploration of things, and they'll get to a place where they feel discomfort or like that's scary, that's unsafe. And that coach, that therapist takes them just to a place where they're still safe, but outside of their comfort zone, and they don't push them too far past that because then it creates more trauma and creates further distance from healing. And by the way, just because you don't work well with somebody doesn't mean it's bad at what they do. Not everybody's cup of tea either. So it's a lot of it's about fit.
Yeah. And we're talking about fit for the person who's been acting out. The other really important piece of this is, unfortunately, a lot of individuals, if their specialty is sexual addiction or infidelity, and they work with primarily male partners, more often than not, unfortunately, I see they are not partner sensitive. And I'm thinking of a particular case consultation that came up recently where the therapist was a sex therapist, and one of the books that the sex therapist was recommending, she was recommending a book about, I want to say it was like polyamory. Was that
Mm.
anyway? And like how triggering that is to a betrayed partner. And so, in essence, she was encouraging her client to explore maybe you do want more than just your wife. And so, this poor betrayed partner who's over here hoping that her spouse is going and getting support that is going to protect her relationship. And instead is coming home saying, I don't know if I'm even made to have a relationship with just you, and how absolutely traumatizing that was to her and where she was at.
Yeah.
So, really getting help not only for somebody who can support that individual in their healing, but if they are in a relationship, making sure that they're also partner sensitive for either male or female, depending on which
Yeah.
way it goes, but partner sensitive.
And
That's important.
and what you can watch for, and this is what I have guys compare it to, is think about your favorite coach you've ever had. If you played some type of sports growing up, you would have really valued him, but hated him too. Like they pushed me and I knew they cared about me. And at times I hated their guts because it hurt. It hurt. And the growth was tremendous. But ultimately, they had my best interest in mind and they would go at the right speed. So I think if I like my coach or my therapist, like a lot, that's really problematic. And I think if I don't ever feel safe there, if I feel like I'm just exhausted and there's not the right pacing done, I think that's problematic. Too much, too little.
Yeah. The next myth, I'm going to swing into this one because there's a little bit of a relation here. But again, it's the myth of, okay, I've been sober for a while, so I don't need to worry about a relapse. And then I'm going to add, because what I see here too is I've been sober a while and I don't need professional help. So there's this idea that we don't need to worry. We don't need to maybe do more work. I see a lot of times I've been sober for a while, so I'm going to back off of work and group and support. So why is this a myth?
My brain just blew up with this one because it's watching people scale back is it makes a lot of sense that they are, or there's just a lot of discomfort. Like, wow, that doesn't feel right. Or, yeah, that's evolving. And you'll notice I use the word evolve. Like, okay, you went from therapy once a week to every other week. That might be an evolution to your recovery, and that makes sense. And I'm not being very specific right now, and I know this. Or you went from every week to every other week, and that makes me really uncomfortable. We dig into the why behind that. And that's what I think about this. I've been sober for a while. I don't need to worry about relapse. Hey, Amy, what do you hear that is actually being said? Are those the words when you think about this, working with the partner?
Yeah, it's that and then that addition that I added on, it's I've been sober for a while, and so I can slow down the work, I can back off a little bit, even requiring the partner to back off a little bit, trust me more. And I think what's standing out to me is sober for a while, we're looking for recovery, and recovery is so much deeper. And this is where if you have been sober for a while, what stands out to me is like, okay, then where are we at relationally in your work with sobriety and recovery? Because there's two different things. So if you've been sober for a while, okay, then are you digging into your family of origin stuff? Are you ready for that? And
So
Luke, you were talking like what you said there
yeah,
before of like, okay, it's getting uncomfortable or is it getting too comfortable? And that's probably what I see more is that they're getting comfortable in their sobriety. And so that's where maybe they're like, okay, I'm going to back off a little bit.
yeah. Hey, believe me, I'm not perfect with this at all. So when I think about the evolution of recovery, Choose Recovery Services has a safety plan that we work with our clients on. Like, okay, what does my recovery look like? But we build into that safety plan when change happens, and I'm not doing the same thing today as I do tomorrow. What would I do to execute change? Maybe that's a frequency change. And that is actually there's a lot of detail that goes into that. And just to go to our safety plan, what we encourage is okay, you know what? Maybe I don't need group as much. I'm going to process that. I'm going to journal that and I'm going to think about that for a period of time. I'm just going to think about it and be with it. And then once I've done it, it still feels about right. I'm going to connect with my accountability partner. I'm going to connect with my therapist or my coach. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to go, what's my reason? What's my motivation? And then what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to go, what would that look like? And then I'm going to connect with my partner on that. I'm going to check for impact of that change.
Mm,
And then at that point, I implement change, right? And there's no emotion. That's not an emotional based decision. That's a values based decision.
mm,
So it's strategic, it's thought through, there's no surprises, and there's a lot of effort put into it. And that's the part where it's, yeah, that evolution makes sense to me. Like I'm comfortable with that compared to a lot of discomfort because you're scaling back. What's that all about? I don't know. It just doesn't, I don't think I need it the way that I used to. So,
What it doesn't include, though, is scaling back on those regular daily things that have now become part of healthy living. So, what you're talking about is like maybe scaling back on group or scaling back on
yeah,
the number of sessions. But those daily habits now and the skills that have allowed you to maintain sobriety, we don't scale back on that.
no.
We don't
yeah.
scale back on self care. We don't scale back on taking that time to connect to your emotions. We don't scale back on those type of things. And what I see too often is individuals who, if they scale back in one area, they become super black and white and they scale back on everything. And that's a recipe for going back to old behaviors because it is the whole recovery plan and those dailies that help you be the healthiest version of yourself. And so I want to just really highlight what you explained there, Luke, is different than them getting rid of all of those other healthy habits. Because these healthy habits are not to get you sober, get you healthy, and then you stop doing them. This is how healthy adults live.
Mm,
I love that you just, yes.
thank you, Alana. Yeah, thank you. Because I was so focused on therapy or coaching.
No, and you were spot on. I
Yeah.
just had to highlight the difference because I
No, I'm glad we didn't miss that.
Yeah.
And
No, that's
you're
good.
not gonna okay, this is too black and white, okay? I'm gonna just say that, preface that. But we're not gonna find I'll speak to men because that's who I work with just in this area, compulsive behavior. I don't find a lot of them just in healthy living or any of them really going needing to be chased down on the healthy living stuff, needing to be held accountable to it. They're chasing healthy living. They're chasing dailies. They're chasing things that keep them straight. They're not being motivated by other people on that stuff. They're not trying to convince somebody else that, hey, I think I can lighten my load because they recognize that's what keeps them healthy. So I love that you bring that up, Alana.
I think that's so good for the betrayed partner to hear what you just said there too, Luke, because I think that's where it can get confusing and where a lot of the betrayed partners get caught up in the myth. He says he's doing good and he's been sober for a couple of years. But what you said right there is so key, the chasing the growth mindset, and it's really becomes a part of your lifestyle, like Alana, you were saying, and that's what we're looking for, and especially when I think about the multidimensional partner trauma model phase 3, when we're trying to create a new relationship, the only way a new relationship can become new is if we individually are new. And so if we're just checking off a list of sobriety just to go back to now I'm good and I can go back to the way that we were, it doesn't work that way. So,
Yeah.
yeah, such good stuff. Okay, y'all, we are going to wrap up today's episode, and the remainder of our conversation will air next week. After we hit stop on this conversation, we all thought that it would be best to split this up as there's so much content and good stuff that Luke brought to the table. We'd like y'all to noodle on this for a week and then join us again next week for part 3. Perhaps take some time and notice what parts of this episode were your biggest takeaway. Maybe ask yourself what felt hard but true in this episode. Notice what emotions are coming up for you. And remember, emotions are information. So, what do those emotions that you're noticing tell you? Be curious about that and take a few deep breaths before you go back to focusing on all those other important things in your life. And as always, thank you for joining us today and continue to choose healing, choose recovery, and choose you. Take care, everybody.
Hi, this is Hallie Roderick with Choose Recovery Services, and I wanted to share with you a group that I run called Empowerment After Betrayal. And this is specifically for men who are experiencing betrayal trauma due to infidelity and betrayal in your relationship. And in this group, I strive to create a safe space where you can show up and be authentic and connect with other men who are experiencing the similar things. I provide tools and resources along the way that will help you in your own healing. And we meet every week on Mondays at 5:30 Mountain. I'd love to have you join us if this is something that would benefit you. And you can learn more about registering by going to the show notes below or checking out the information on chooserecoveryservices.com.